What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another Wild Rift video. I'm Kangas, and today I'm covering 8 abilities that are incredibly strong and need nerfs as soon as possible. These abilities aren't always the only factor that make their champion strong, but they do contribute to their overall power and need to be tuned down a bit. So hit that sub button and let's get into it.
First up on the list is GRAGAS'S passive, Happy Hour. His passive allows him to periodically heal for a portion on his maximum health upon casting an ability. First of all, as a jungler, this gives him really good sustain and means that he can roam around the map quite healthily. It's pretty obnoxious, but it truly becomes ridiculous once Gragas enters the Baron lane. Winning lane against Gragas is really difficult, since he can pretty much shrug off whatever damage you manage to deal with him with his consistent huge heals. You can't poke him down from range, since he'll just recover more health with his low-cost Drunken Rage. And if you have mana, you're sure to burn through all of it before his health bar gets low. If you trade with him in melee range, it's similarly annoying. You may initially win the trade, but before you know it, he's healing up, and if you don't have similar levels of sustain in your own kit, it can be impossible to truly generate advantages against the fat man in the Baron lane. This sustain is also really useful at all stages of the game. It's great at helping Gragas deal with side lane threats, sustain through team fights, and shrug off enemy poke or random damage he may receive before fights. Having all this extra sustain allows Gragas to take far more risks than most champions in the game, since he can simply heal back up. He can face check bushes, tank skill shots, and look for small engages way more frequently than other champions with far lower risk. Happy Hour is somewhat crucial to how Gragas likes to play the game, but it currently is a little overtuned and really makes playing against Gragas a pain, especially during the early game. Next up on the list for the nerf hammer is Lulu's ultimate, Wild Growth. Wild Growth allows Lulu to enlarge an ally or herself, knocking nearby enemies into the air and granting the ally a large amount of bonus health. For the next few seconds, that ally also gains an aura that slows nearby enemies. There's just so many parts to this ultimate, and all of them are immensely powerful. It's already had its cooldown increase, but it could definitely do with some extra tuning. Wild Growth's knockup is the most powerful part of it and is incredibly useful in both offensive and defensive scenarios. It can be reactively used to interrupt enemy dashes and gap closers, stopping any divers from potentially wiping out your marksman. It's also great on your bruisers and assassins though, giving them extra CC and slows to help melt through the enemy team. The health it grants is hard to ignore, and if they couldn't burst through your marksman after their dash got interrupted, they'll struggle even more with the extra health. And this is also great for your frontline, who still appreciate the extra tankiness. Lastly, the slow is just the cherry on top, helping your frontline stay in range and making sure that the overzealous diver who made the mistake of trying to engage through Lulu can't leave after their plans are foiled. It's such a brutal ability and every aspect of it is really useful. Intelligent Wild Growth usage is make or break for Lulu players. When it's used well, it is obscenely strong and definitely needs to be taken down a notch. Before we continue, make sure to join our Wild Rift Discord in the description down below and sub to the channel to keep up to date with all things related to Wild Rift. The next ability that we think should get nerfed is Miss Fortune's first ability, Double Up. Miss Fortune fires a bullet, damaging an enemy and critically striking a target behind them. This is Miss Fortune's bread and butter during the laning phase and is what makes it so hard to lane against her. Short trades are really hard to win, and even if you respect Miss Fortune, the range of the bounce is also pretty long. On the PC version of the game, Miss Fortune's double up only crits on the second hit if it executes something on the first hit. This means that you actually have to prepare minions and position yourself accordingly to secure that last hit and land your poke. But on the Wild Rift, you only have to make sure the second hit lands, and you don't have to worry about the first one executing. This makes it way easier to use and turns it from a strong nuke into a strong nuke that's really hard to avoid. Admittedly, since minion waves are smaller on the Wild Rift, finding situations to execute a minion with it and land it would be a lot harder, so it's reasonable and an intuitive change. But it's still just too easy to land and deals way too much damage in the early game, and it gives Miss Fortune an incredibly oppressive laning phase, so with it being so OP, it needs a nerf. AMUMU is a very sad mummy, and once he realizes he's on this list, he's gonna get sadder, especially if he gets nerfed. AMUMU'S ultimate, Curse of the Sad Mummy, could definitely do with one of these. Curse of the Sad Mummy entangles enemies surrounding AMUMU in bandages, applying his curse passive, damaging them, and rendering them unable to attack or move. This ability is one of the most powerful and easy to use AoE crowd control abilities in the game, and can be really hard to position against. In the PC version of the game, Curse of the Sad Mummy used to only root and disarm players. Disarm would only prevent auto attacks, and abilities could still be used. This later changed to a stun, which is what is now on Wild Rift. Initially, it wasn't considered too broken, as you could still cast your abilities. While still very powerful, when it began preventing your spellcasts too, it just became ridiculous. Curse of the Sad Mummy is a you will do nothing button, and it will be used to stop incoming threats, prevent the enemy from escaping, or simply lock down an entire team for your team to follow up on. It's easy to use and covers a very large area, so once you've bandage tossed in, you're sure to find value. It works great for protecting your carries and is also great at setting up your fellow divers. It's all around a wonderful ability, and since it's so easy to use, it's just too OP. A reduction in range or a return to the disarm could be possible approaches for lowering the power.
But before we get into the rest of the video, it's time for our question of the day. What's one ability that needs to be buffed? I know this one's dangerous, but I think that Vayne's Silverbolt could actually have a little more power to it, so she can actually get out of the laning phase and turn into a late game carry. Let me know yours though in the comments down below.
Next up on our list is Olaf's first ability, Undertow. When Olaf uses Undertow, he throws an axe into the ground at a target location, dealing damage to enemies it passes through and slowing their movement speed. If Olaf picks up an axe, the ability cooldown is reduced by 4.5 seconds. The Berserker's axe-tossing rampages are vital to his identity, and while it's extremely fun to play, it's really obnoxious to play against. Undertow does everything for Olaf. It helps him farm, it helps him poke, it helps him chase down squishies, and it also helps him DPS through tankier foes. Undertow does sizable damage, but most importantly, the slow is brutal. Olaf is virtually unmatched in damage output, and if he's allowed to hit, he will burst you. Undertow complements this perfectly, with the chain slows helping him get into range and maintain close distance against even the slippiest of foes. It's fairly long range, and because the slow helps you get into range and land the next axe, it's really easy to fall prey to the Undertow chain and find yourself cut down rapidly. Chaining together Undertows is one of the most satisfying aspects of playing Olaf, so nerfing that would be sad. But a possible alternative is to just lower the duration or severity of the slow itself. Orianna has been dominating the Wild Rift for a while now, so it's no surprise that she finds herself on the list of abilities that absolutely need a nerf. While every one of her abilities you have an argument for being nerf-worthy, Command Attack is the most critical to her gameplay and probably the most obnoxious part of her kit. On cast, Orianna commands her ball to fire towards a target location, dealing magic damage to targets along the way. Her ball then remains at the target location after. This is the basis of which all Orianna's abilities work off of, and is the centerpiece of her kit. Command Attack may not seem like the most broken ability at first glance, but once you look at its low cooldown and really good damage, it's just really strong. During the laning phase, intelligent command attack usage will net you slow advantages throughout the lane, and responding to the long-range harass is really hard for most champs. If the Orianna player has good movement, it's almost impossible to retaliate and should be spamming the spell to whittle away your health bar. Later on in the game, the cooldown becomes extremely low, which means that the ball can be constantly repositioned to threaten the enemy team. In mid to late game fights, approaching the team with Orianna can be borderline impossible, since she will always be moving the ball into a position to threaten more command attacks or even a command shockwave. The zoning potential of the ball is immense, and command attack's low cooldown means that it is always up in your face. It's quite hard to play around, and because of that, it needs a nerf. The second to last ability on the list is possibly the most annoying, and it's Evelyn's passive, Demon Shade. When Evelyn is out of combat, she enters Demon Shade, which heals Evelyn when she's low on health and grants camouflage after level 5. The healing is pretty ignorable, however it is still useful. The more frustrating and obnoxious part is the camouflage that she's granted once she hits level 5. This allows her to control the map and appear in lanes where you never expect her to be. She can exert control over every lane, and if you don't respect her, she'll end you quickly with her high burst. The strongest part of Demon Shade is that there isn't much counterplay to it. With camouflage, you can only be seen if your enemy is close, but once you're close to your enemy, you can just kill them. On the PC version of the game, you can use control wards to spot Evelyn out, but they don't exist yet in the Wild Rift. There's no way to spot her out except for warding her camps, which can be tricky if you haven't tracked her down already. Demon Shade is immensely powerful, and the lack of obvious counterplay in an environment with minimal cohesion makes it really hard to play against. And our last ability on the list today is Kai'Sa's first ability, Icathian Rain. On cast, Kai'Sa shoots a swarm of missiles that seek out nearby targets. When upgraded, it shoots even more missiles. During the laning phase, this ability is great for last-hitting minions, trading, and pushing waves. It's decent, but not great. Once it's upgraded though, it becomes truly amazing. It deals incredible damage, and you should win pretty much every trade once you have that upgrade. When you're isolated against an enemy and get all the missiles on them, it is devastating. Kai'Sa becomes a fearsome assassin, and any isolated duels are incredibly easy for her to win. The damage from this single upgrade is truly insane, and so much of Kai'Sa's power is loaded into this crazy spike that you get when the upgrade comes. If you're playing Kai'Sa, make sure to go ham once you unlock your upgraded Icathian Rain and abuse it while you still can.
All the abilities we listed are huge reasons for why their champions are so powerful, and mastering their usage will turn you from simply good at a champion to an expert. At least until they get nerfed. But hey, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, sub to the channel, and answer our question of the day in the comments down below. I love reading them, but as always, best of luck on the Rift. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.